Imagine spending the whole day stranded on a tiny boat in the middle of the ocean with no engine, no one coming to rescue you, no land in sight, no food, no water, no supplies, and the sun beaming down on you. Now, imagine surviving 438 days in those conditions. Because from 2012 to 2014, that is exactly what Jose Salvador Alvarenga did. This man went out on a fishing trip, got caught in a storm, and was cast away in the ocean. The engine on his small boat flooded, and as the days turned to nights without a bit of land in sight, things got more and more worrying. Not just for Jose, but also for his intended fishing partner for that day, Ezekiel. And roughly 10 weeks into their ordeal, Ezekiel falls ill. He ends up starving to death, and Jose sits with his deceased body on that boat for almost a week, talking to it before waking up and grasping reality and throwing the body overboard into the ocean. But the most shocking part of this story may not actually be how Jose Alvarenga managed to survive another 52 weeks after that event at sea on his own. It may not be the fact that multiple ships sailed past him when he was cast away, and he even claims that some had passengers on board that waved at him. The most shocking part may well actually be what happened once he returned to land.
The family of the victim who died during this storm is now suing him, and they are accusing him of eating the body of their family member to stay alive.
Yep. You heard that right. Ezekiel's family believed that Jose actually killed and then ate Ezekiel. But they didn't always believe this. They kind of started to claim it around the time of the release of Jose's book. Clearly, we've got a lot to unravel here, so let's get into it. But people, before we do, thank you so much for your support on this channel over the past 3-4 weeks, is it now? Since I started posting, I'm overwhelmed. I did not think that I would get anywhere near the amount of subscribers that I have already, have anywhere near the amount of views, and all of the positive feedback on these videos. So thank you so much for that. I'm working hard to get these ones banged out for you. If you are one of the people that's able to hype a video on YouTube, please do that for me right now. Do it for the channel if you like it, because it means that I'm going to get out there more and be able to bring a lot more content for you guys. Let's get into the video. So Jose Salvador Alvarenga was born in 1975 in El Salvador. He wasn't rich, far from it actually. He grew up in a very poor neighborhood, and at that time El Salvador had one of the highest murder rates in the world. This wasn't a safe place to live, especially if you didn't have your wits about you, got into trouble, or were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it's actually really hard to find out a lot of the details about Jose's life. I don't know by the point of his disappearance whether he was living in the country legally, illegally. One thing we do know is in his younger years, he did meet a woman, and he actually had a child with that woman, a daughter named Fatima, and he loved his daughter. He wanted to be a good father to his daughter, but I have mentioned that the environment was hardly a safe one. And one day Jose is in a bar and he gets into a bar fight. He gets stabbed 11 times, and one of the men who is alleged to have stabbed him was, I suppose, a gang member. He probably had problems with loads of different people, and for one reason or another, within about 4 days of that incident, while Jose is still actually recovering from the injuries that he sustained, in my opinion was lucky to live through, this gang member who was apparently responsible gets murdered. The rest of the gang don't know who did the murder, and therefore Jose Alvarenga becomes suspect number 1. And again, I'm just going off the articles on the internet that I can find that are more factual. Of course, there's speculation that Jose himself was involved in gangs and stuff like that, but I'm not going to speculate on it unless I can find anything concrete. But what we do know for sure is, due to not feeling safe after this incident, Jose left El Salvador when his daughter Fatima was just 1 year old. He left behind his daughter, daughter, his parents, and his missus. And he travels through a few countries, but he eventually lands in Mexico. And this is where he realizes that he's a talented fisherman. He takes a job on as an apprentice almost, but he excels. And within a year or so, he's catching sharks, marlin, sailfish, and more. But the thing is, where he would have to travel into the deeper ocean to catch these sort of fish. We're talking 50 to 100 miles off shore on a 25-foot wooden boat with just an engine attached to the back. Now tell me if I'm being over dramatic, but that sounds fucking terrifying. Am I right or am I wrong? That's scary, no? But Jose had a lot more bottle than me, clearly, because he would regularly do this and he wouldn't moan about it. And by 2012, he was described really well by the people that worked with him. That lifestyle that clearly consisted of a little bit of crime, whether he was a victim or a perpetrator, maybe a factor of the area he was living in, he had left that behind. He wasn't described at all as a violent person or anything like that. The contrary, he was described as someone that was fun, someone that had a bit of a zest for life, and someone that you would like to be around. More than one person described Jose as a work hard, play hard character. And Jose was kind of his own boss to an extent. He was part of a larger group, but he knew that he could make 1 week's worth of money in 1 day, more or less. He would go out 1 day at sea and he would catch so much that it's alleged that he would have enough money to come back and to spend it on whatever he wanted, which is alleged to have consisted mostly of partying. But I'm not trying to paint him in a bad light here. He was described as a good laugh, someone that could take a joke very well, and it was a good job that he was, because they used to tease him at work about the amount he would eat, and they had a nickname for him that in essence was the pig. And the people that he worked with said that Jose would eat almost anything. Everyone respected him, and the group that he sailed amongst, in their words, described him as badass because of the fact that there would often be storms that would put off other sailors even going out and trying to work that day, whereas as the rain and everything else, thunder would be lashing down, you'd see Jose's boat come back towards the shore, him drenched, and a couple of massive fishes in either hand, probably the size of him by this point. And more often than not, around that time, he wouldn't be alone. You wouldn't go that far off the shore on your own for the most part. So he had a crewmate called Ray Perez, and Ray Perez was the man that would usually go out with Jose. But on the 17th of November 2012, the day when Jose is ready to set sail and go out for a big day of catching fish, he makes contact with Ray. He calls him and asks him where he is, and Ray informs him, I'm not going to be able to work today. So Jose goes out looking, and he finds a young lad called Ezekiel Cordoba. Reports vary a lot on Ezekiel's experience within the sort of fishing world, because a lot of people have said that he had absolutely no experience. I have read some reports that said that he had a few months of experience, but the point to be made is he had nowhere near the amount of experience as Jose's normal partner Ray, and he had nowhere near the same amount of experience as Jose himself. He actually only met Jose that day. The pair had never met or spoken before. But Ezekiel was tight for cash, and the offer of $50 was enough to persuade him for a hard day's work. And I say a hard day's work because Jose had said to him, we will be out there for the whole day. This could be a 24-hour trip by the time we've set sail and come back, but Ezekiel at the time was undeterred. So the pair set out on this tiny small boat off the coast of Mexico. Jose's obviously leading, Ezekiel's just doing what he's told, but people have told Jose that there's a storm brewing this day. But remember, this fella's considered a bit of a wild card who likes a storm or two, and therefore that's not really a massive issue for Jose, because he believes what he can do is just basically take safeguarding measures. Don't go out anywhere near as deep as he usually would. I said that he would usually go between 50 to 100 miles off of the coast, but this day he had decided to go about 15 miles off because he had heard that this storm could be a bad one. But after a a few hours, the trip was going well. The refrigerated storage container was almost halfway full, I suppose, with fish they had already been catching, but at that point, the storm hits. The heavens open. Rain is bellowing down, and the winds are strong enough to knock a man over. And these two are currently 15 miles from the shore. And this is where the first major problem happens, because the storm floods the boat's engine. And after a little while, these two realise that their attempts in being able to scoop up the water that's now rising into the bottom of the boat is failing, and therefore they feel that they need to dump the entire catch from the day. Some multiple fish, I'm not exactly sure on what types, but multiple different fishes were now being dumped back into the sea. You'd have to imagine that they would have left one or two, surely, but I don't know. I'm just reading here, approximately 500 kilograms of fish was dumped into the sea. That's mental. How does a 25-foot boat even manage to hold 500 kg? And I say surely they left a few fish on board. Well, actually, probably not, because as bad as it sounds with the context, at this point here, this wasn't too dissimilar to storms that Jose had been able to weather in the past. And Jose himself would have still been very confident at this point. But he was wrong, and the storm didn't stop. It pretty much destroyed everything on board of the boat, and this was including electricals. Now obviously Jose had a walkie-talkie at the time, and he used the refrigerative sort of space that the fish was in as a shield from the rain, the weather. They actually use this very regularly, and he radios back to a guy called Willie, who is said to be something to do with the Coast Guard. He basically says to Willie, and I'm using his words that it's alleged that he says to Willie, "We are absolutely fucked out here at sea." Willie says to him, "Right, okay, lower your anchor so you don't go anywhere." And Jose informs him that the boat does not have an anchor. Willie says that they are now going to send people out looking for Jose and Ezekiel. But shortly after that call, every electronical device upon board fails. But remember, there's someone on land who knows that Jose and Ezekiel are out there. He doesn't have the coordinates because the electrics have failed, but he knows roughly how far they've gone. These people know what sort of areas they might be in because they understand the way the sea moves and how it drifts things and things like that, and therefore the searches are deployed straight away. Now, officially, right, the search was said to have lasted 2 weeks for these guys, but this storm went on for a good couple of days. So reports after the discovery of Jose have actually transpired, and it looks a little bit more like 48 hours was actually the real amount of time given during this actual search. And let's be honest, without sounding too insensitive here, if you've not found someone by 48 hours, you're probably going to assume that they're dead, aren't you? Regardless, Jose and Ezekiel are now out at sea. Ezekiel's family know he's missing, but Jose's have no idea because, one, he's allegedly living under a new name by this point, and two, he hasn't had any contact with any member of his family in the past 8 years since he had sort of broken contact with his mother and father. And over the next 10 to 16 weeks, it's obviously hard to tell really because they were hungry, confused, struggling to keep track of time, but they fought as hard as they possibly could to survive. Ezekiel was said to have struggled, but Jose said that he was trying his hardest to catch whatever he could, including turtles that at the time were swimming nearby the boat. Jose would let him get close enough, and then he would grab them, he would dissect them, he would prepare them as raw meat, I suppose, for the pair to eat, and then Jose would drink the turtle's blood because it was obviously a form of liquid and they weren't getting much at the time and it had nutrients in it, stuff like that. I'm not too sure. Ezekiel did not drink the turtle's blood and he didn't want to do this, and actually this was quite problematic because they would go weeks without drinking any water, because if there wasn't rainfall, then there was nothing clean to drink. And as you'll go on to learn, you don't want to get sick cast away at sea. Jose reportedly even caught small sharks with his bare hands during this time, birds. There were a lot of different things that he was able to catch that, if all these stories are true, it really does show you just how far mankind's quest for survival will actually go. But within 10 to 16 weeks of them getting cast away, Ezekiel's both physical and mental state have deteriorated massively. He was seeing things. Sometimes Jose would even just join in with his fantasies, even though he knew that they weren't right, but he felt that he was comforting his shipmate at the time. Ezekiel apparently used to ask Jose if he could go to the shop to get the two of them fruit, and Jose would walk up to the other end of the boat and then walk back and tell him, I went to the shop but they were closed and I'll try again tomorrow, and things like that. And on what the pair believed to be Christmas Eve, I've got absolutely no idea when this was, because they don't really have any idea when this was, but when they believed that it was Christmas Eve, they decided to have a Christmas Eve meal, and Jose actually caught 2 birds. He had a little wooden prod thing on the front of the ship, and I'm not sure whether they had bait there or what, but birds would come and perch on there, and he would wait long enough so that he could eventually get the bird to sit down, something like that, and then he could catch it. He caught 2 of them. He prepared them that night for himself and Ezekiel, and they sat down and started eating. Once they start eating, Ezekiel immediately begins to vomit. He starts to turn purple almost, and Jose starts to check the carcass of the bird that Ezekiel had been eating. He claims to have found a small yellow sea snake inside of the stomach of the bird, and therefore determined that the bird must have eaten it and Ezekiel had been poisoned from the venom. Ezekiel's choking, he's foaming at the mouth, and Jose actually nurses him through the initial poisoning. But the event left Ezekiel completely traumatized and terrified now of eating food. Not just birds, even the food that they had been living off, which was just about enough to keep them going, Ezekiel was now refusing. And I've seen it with old people in hospitals, family members of mine, when they refuse to eat. It basically is the end. It means that within a matter of weeks they're gonna go. And that's someone in an NHS cared for hospital, do you know what I mean? So someone that's cast away at sea, you know what's going to happen. And that did happen. Within just a matter of days, Ezekiel died in the arms of Jose. Jose actually noted that although his death and the events that led up to it were massively painful, he did find a brief moment of silence, a moment of comfort in that moment there, where it felt like time stood still for a minute and it felt like Ezekiel was at peace. And over the next 6 days or so, Jose props up Ezekiel's body at the other end of the boat and begins to converse with him. He's obviously in an intense state of shock, loneliness, delusion. He's gone mad himself, basically. And he said that it's only one evening when he wakes up from his shelter and he looks out at the deteriorating body of Ezekiel when he realizes and comes to his senses that he now has to bury his fishing partner overboard at sea. Jose said he took off any useful clothing that Ezekiel was wearing, and then he said he actually fainted as he dumped his body into the ocean. Now, Jose was obviously the more experienced one of the two. He was the better at catching prey, whether that be birds, fish, small sharks, things like that. And that actually meant, in some kind of tragic irony, Jose almost benefited a little bit, especially from a eating point of view, once Ezekiel passed away, because Ezekiel wasn't really contributing towards catching any of the food that they were eating. So all of a sudden, Jose is catching probably the same amount and being able to eat a little bit more. He noted himself that he had felt that he put on a little bit of weight after Ezekiel passed. But to be honest, that would have been small, if any, comfort for Jose, who was said to be desperately missing his only companion. And for the next 9 to 10 months, he literally just had himself for company. And one of the most shocking things about this story is the amount of boats and ships that Jose claims to have seen sail straight past him. He said that he saw anywhere up to 20 ships, and usually he would get close enough to see the colours of the containers on those ships. He did note that most of the ships that passed him were always carrying cargo. And correct me if I'm wrong, I know nothing about this sort of stuff, but I believe that a lot of the ships that are sailing with cargo are on an autopilot type thing, so it probably wouldn't even alert them for a small 25-foot boat at the time. There are some people who theorize, I'm not going to call them conspiracy theorists, I don't like that word or that phrase, but there's some people that theorize that because of the amount of money involved and time frames that have to have been met and stuff like that, there could have been people on these ships that saw Jose but knew that a rescue mission would financially and just time-wise put them back way too far. And one of the reasons I say this is because Jose claimed that one of these boats came so close to him that they nearly capsized his boat. The tale I find the most shocking though is when Jose claims that a ship sailed past him and it was close enough that he could see 3 to 4 people at the back of the ship. He claims that those people spotted him. He was holding a stick in his hand, waving it, and he was just in his underpants. And he says that those people were waving back at him, but the ship never turned round or came to save him. And again, I just want to interrupt at this point, people, to tell you that these are obviously Jose's memories, and this was a man that was cast away at sea for roughly 14 months. This man's going to have suffered from delusion. This man's going to have had mental problems and things like that. I am just giving you his account. And that meant by the morning of January the 30th, 2014, Jose thought that he would once again rise from the container that he was sleeping beneath to see nothing but sea once again. A day of struggling to catch fish or hoping for rainfall, or possibly even a day where he would once again have to resort to drinking his own urine. But when he does rise from that container that day, he sees land. It's actually a small cluster of islands called the Avon Atoll, which is part of the Marshall Islands, and he was reportedly found by a local couple. He was only partially clothed, I believe. I think he was just in a pair of pants. He was waving a knife in his hand, allegedly, and shouting at the pair in Spanish, which they didn't speak. But they took him in, they helped him, and later he was ushered onto a boat that took him to a proper hospital on the mainland. And when they got him to the hospital, his condition was quite severe. He was severely dehydrated. His ankles and joints were completely swollen, multiple infections, immune system failing. He had parasites inside of his liver, and all of this and more meant that he had to stay in that hospital up until the 10th of February 2014. Then he was able to fly home, not back to Mexico. He flew to El Salvador. He reunites with his mother and his father, who actually had no idea that he was missing. They may have known that there were 2 men missing at sea, but they did not know that one of those men was their son, Jose. It was only when his actual picture after his survival was put in the media that they realized that it was their son. They believed that he could have already been dead. And as for his daughter, Fatima, she didn't actually remember her dad, having only been about 1 when he left. But it's said that this is the point when the two really did start to build their relationship. And one of the things that Jose felt he needed to do as soon as he was physically able to was to fulfill a dying wish to his friend Ezekiel. They both promised each other that if either one of them was to pass, the other would go and meet with the family, and they would tell the family the tales of how they got on at sea and things like that. That's exactly what Jose did on the 15th of March 2014. It's actually captured on camera. He walks up the driveway and meets Ezekiel's mother, Rosella, and she reportedly told Jose that, "I would have liked to have welcomed my son, like this. Jose said that it actually filled him with a lot of happiness to meet his friend's mother and to be able to tell of the heroics that their son performed during those times, but he also said that it was a very uncomfortable conversation at times, and he had braced them, prepared them for this, because they were going to have to find out some of the more gruesome details about their time at sea and about their son, brother, family member's death. And following the meeting, Rosiella, Ezekiel's mum, said that the meeting had at least given her a sense of tranquility and peace. I believe she felt at the time like it had given her a bit of closure. And it's noted online that apparently this was the second son that Rosiella had actually lost at sea. I don't know if anyone in the comment section is able to tell me anything about that. However, a year later, the family of Ezekiel learned that Jose has written, or at least been helped to write, a book and plans to release it. This book was talking about his survival and his journey and how the adaptation's been since coming back to the normal world, and this was news apparently to Ezekiel's family. They hadn't been informed about this book. So what do? They file a $1 million lawsuit against Jose, and you would assume, like I would have going into the case without the background, that lawsuit is because of the fact that they believe that he was profiting where really they should have been getting a cut, Ezekiel's family, and I could kind of understand that if that was the case. But no, that's not what they were claiming. They were claiming in the lawsuit that Jose had eaten Ezekiel. They claimed that the improbability of his survival was so vast that he must have had to have eaten his shipmate Ezekiel to be able to survive. They also said that they found it suspicious that Jose didn't keep the body. Again, I can't really give judgment on that, but if I had no idea of when I might be returning to land, or if, I don't know whether I would keep a body on board with me. I don't know whether I would expect a friend of mine to keep my body on board if that was the circumstance, but very hard to put yourself in these people's shoes, isn't it? And the book, by the way, wasn't like a massive success. It didn't really make Jose all that much money, but the family felt that they should have been cut in on it. And there was actually some legal discussions during or before they ended up making these claims, and the representation for Jose ended up switching and becoming the lawyer for Ezekiel's family. And the other part of the claim was that there were a lot of contradictory statements apparently from Jose, such as inconsistent dates of the departure. They also noted that he had a healthy appearance upon his rescue, so they said that physically he had too much weight on him and things like that. So what was the outcome of this case? Well, the first thing I've got to say is eating Ezekiel's body wouldn't really make that much sense in the long term, and I'm not denying it could make sense in the short term, but obviously they had a box that acted like a fridge, but the electrics were gone. There was no refrigerative system on this boat, and what I'm saying therefore is if you had Ezekiel's body on there, what, you've got 24 hours or so to eat it before it becomes infectious, that it could actually mess your body up. I'm not too sure with that one, you know. But what you could say is if Jose was the one catching all the food and stuff like that, then maybe he got selfish and decided that it would be easier to kill Ezekiel. But obviously Jose very, very much denied this, and you've got to feel sympathy for this man, having been through what he was said to have been through, survived all that time. To have this thrown sort of kind of back in your face is something that, I don't know, it doesn't almost sit right with me. Jose Alvarenga was very firm in claiming his innocence and denying the claims. He actually took a polygraph test voluntarily. I know people will speak about how accurate and inaccurate lie detectors are, but he voluntarily took one of those, passed one of those, and not only that, survival experts said that although the family said there was inconsistencies with his stories, there were actually a lot of consistencies which would show when he recounted coming across certain creatures like turtles and the sea snake that he said about and stuff like that. When they worked out the pattern, they all lined up really, really well. In fact, way more lined up about his story that, by the way, he would have had no idea where he was at the time. So he could have said, oh, well, about 6 months in, I caught this. There's none of that in that part of the ocean. It's a lie. And that's not what happened. His story actually did really line up well. No criminal charges were ever filed, and the civil suit was eventually reported as dropped or unsolved due to lack of evidence. I mean, what evidence could you have apart from a confession that obviously isn't going to come? And not much is known about Jose now and about what he's up to, apart from the fact that he is apparently working hard on building bridges with his daughter Fatima, who pretty much was his main reason, especially after Ezekiel's passing, for fighting as hard as he could to stay alive, to have the chance to reconnect and actually maybe build bridges on a lot of the mistakes that he had made before he was swept away at sea. And every report that I can find suggests that that's very much what he has done. But also what he's done since writing the book is stay out of the public eye. I think that he would definitely need time to recover from what he went through, and especially time to recover from the allegations that were thrown towards him afterwards, because I think they would have been very mentally damaging for him. And as for the book didn't make a lot of money. Trust me, my dad's an author. I know that books don't make a hell of a lot of money unless they are hella successful, and documentaries and stuff like that were more successful around this case. Probably why I'm making a YouTube video on it and not writing a book. Well, that and the fact that I can't really write. But either way, the book didn't make all that much money. And around the time of the first anniversary of the book, Jose's brother-in-law described Alvarenga as still having no money and relied on his family for basic necessities like food and medicine. So was there a fairy tale ending to this story? No, I don't think there was. I think it's a story of survival, to be honest, and a story where many people may disagree, agree. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section below, and this is a really grim question to ask, right? But if you and your friend were on a boat and you did pass away from natural causes and stuff like that, would you tell your friend to eat your body? Just if it meant that they could stay alive? I know it's a really grim question to ask someone, but I had to ask myself that question when I was looking into this case. I'm not at all suggesting that that's what happened, by the way, but I think that people have very different thoughts and chains of thoughts on survival and just what should be defined as fair survival. Because a lot of lawyers suggested that even if Jose admitted and did eat Ezekiel's body, which I don't believe he did, by the way, a lot of lawyers suggested that he would be able to get away with that because of certain rights due to survival or something like that. Maybe you lot can fill me in the comment section below. But let me know what you thought of this story, of this video, if you want to call it that. There's so many stories like this that aren't necessarily crime related, but I am really interested in telling, so I'd love to do more of them, and I would only love it if you lot love the video. Please show me you do by subscribing, hyping it, liking it, doing all that good shit, and I will see you all in the next one.